Hello everybody, Eternal Flame here, and welcome to the chapter review of 252, The Decisive Battle in the Uninhabited Demon-Infested Shinjuku, Part 24. Hallelujah, we still got the perfect, absolutely stunning, glorious names come up with by Gege directly. Just absolutely perfect names right there. Without further ado, let's actually get into the chapter review. As the chapter immediately starts out with us going a little bit back in time, with Kusakabe and Ino talking about the barrier that Yuji, Yuta, and Rika are directly fighting against Sukuna in, because they can't actually see inside of the barrier. With Kusakabe directly complimenting Yuta's ability to move the location of the barrier itself, something that we've only seen a few sorcerers do in the past. They also begin to discuss how their plan right now is to wait for the barrier to shatter itself directly by Yuta Akotsu, so that basically everyone can jump Jujutsu Kaisen Sukuna the second that the barrier does break and shatter, so Maki can land a sneak attack on him in the process. Though very interestingly, they also note that Choso was originally supposed to be in the barrier as well, which that's going to be a little bit more important later on, but I still find it very interesting that we could have gotten Choso, Yuta, Rika, and Yuji fighting against Sukuna all at once, because that would have been absolute hype last chapter. Granted, Choso would have just been cut in half by a normal slash, but that's beside the point. With Maki getting herself into a running stance in preparation for when Yuta directly chooses to destroy the barrier as the signal for when it's their time to attack. However, we get a very interesting thing with the last chapter, because the last chapter made it kind of ambiguous whether it was actually Sukuna who destroyed the domain or it was Yuta who destroyed the domain, but they very heavily implied, just straight up says, that it was actually Yuta who chose to destroy the domain in order to signal for them to come in, and not actually Sukuna who destroyed the domain from the outside. As then we see Rika catch Yuta and just start to hold his body together, likely trying to make him heal. We don't actually ever get confirmation whether Yuta lived or not this chapter, but this does add some copium and makes it more likely that they did live. I'm just not expecting to see them for the rest of the battle, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, but if I'm being honest with you guys, that's a much better fate than dying, considering a lot of other people are just kind of dying right now, and I don't think you guys want you to enter back in the battlefield and die. As Uyui also manages to catch Rika and Yuta and make them teleport away. Uyui just being the hard carry, the hard champ of this entire battle. Because let's be real, Uyui is just the GOAT. Now I do want to talk a little bit about the fact about how there's like this short little part of the page that actually looks like it's very rushed in terms of art style. It's not really clear if Gege is doing this intentionally or not, but I'm not going to knock Gege for it either way. I'm okay with it. I don't think it's that bad of an art style. Like, I genuinely like it a little bit. I don't know why I like the entire feeling of how scuffed it is, but I just do. But overall, that's just my opinion on it. I want to hear what you guys' opinion are on this little scuffed part of the chapter itself. As then Sukuna begins to think directly about what their plans were, which was when Sukuna was once assumed that he had absolute victory, that Maki would immediately attack and go in for the kill directly on Sukuna. However, Maki would be able to pass through the barrier due to not possessing any cursed energy, as well as the fact that Maki's sword was likely placed inside the domain before she could even enter, in order for Maki to pick up the sword and not be directly detected by Sukuna. So this does directly confirm that Sukuna has never ever seen anyone with no cursed energy in the past, which is very consistent with something Yuki directly talks about, how Toji was the first of his kind and no one ever had no cursed energy in the past until Toji, and well, now Maki, which makes a lot of sense considering that was Sukuna. So we've at least know for a fact that Sukuna has never seen anyone without cursed energy in the Heian era. As then directly after, Sukuna starts to think about the stab that he had directly taken, and the fact that the gash is healing much slower in comparison to any of his other wounds, which is talking about the Soul Split Katana and the amount of damage the Soul Split Katana had directly done to him. As then we get a direct narrator explanation, which I'm going to read out now. If the Split Soul Katana is wielded by an individual capable of perceiving the soul, the wound impaired by them cannot ordinarily be healed by use of the reverse curse technique, for one would need to be aware of the outline of their own soul in order to do so. As a result of inhabiting a single body that contained two souls, Sukuna was made aware of the outline of his own soul, similar to Itadori Yuji. However, due to the after effects of his battle with Gojo Satoru, Sukuna was unable to fully treat this wound via the reverse curse technique. Now, there are a lot of important things to be established through these few lines of narrator dialogue, which the first thing that needs to be established is the fact that Soul Split Katana can be healed if you are aware of the outline of the soul, which there's a very limited amount of people who are actually able to heal it, even more so, because RGT is already a rare, but the only like two people who are guaranteed able to heal it right now are like Yuji and Sukuna. We don't know if Gojo can actually see the outline of his soul or is aware of it, so, like, Gojo's kinda able to see it, but not fully, but yeah. Also, Choso can see it, because Choso's also aware of his own soul, because Choso is a vessel. Also, number two, and this is the most important thing that I think needs to be established overall, This single line of narration just puts it to bed completely that Mahito is able to get hurt by any of the vessels, because they directly say that the reason that a character can become aware of the outline of the soul is if a body has two souls contained within it, i.e. every single vessel, every single reincarnated sorcerer, Choso himself, they are all able to directly harm Mahito for fact. It is no longer up for debate. This is just straight up how it works. If you are a vessel, you are now able to hurt Mahito. Oh, and also Sukuna can't heal this wound fully because he'd taken too much damage from Gojo, and his RCT output is still a little bit low from that battle. He's still a little bit sleepy from it after all. As then, Yuji tries to jump into the fight before feeling a lot of pain. And this was admittedly something that did actually confuse me a little bit when the spoilers were coming out, because the spoilers didn't actually make it fully clear. However, when we actually have the full chapter translation, it makes it a lot more clear what the issue was. As Yuji directly says himself, even with the fact I've learned reverse curse technique, I've eaten 4 attacks that would have killed me. Something in my body hasn't completely healed. But where which part? Effectively, it was saying that Yuji has been specifically trying to heal every single part of his body at once, or every single part of his body that was getting damaged by the attack. But because of the fact that he missed a spot, which was likely internal and important, he wasn't actually able to heal fully, and he was still having to deal and live with that damage. As it's then, the best big brother of all time, Choso, directly arrives in order to teach Yuji better on how to use RCT, or at least to tell him to visualize what he taught him and remember what he taught him. And I want to say this now, for anyone who is saying that this chapter was scuffed, you can blame this panel for the reason why, because of how much detail actually just straight up went into this panel. So if you think some parts of this chapter is scuffed, that's your reason for why, more than likely. As it then, Choso directly says, remember what you were taught, visualize it. Allow the blood to spread throughout every corner of your body like roots. Visualize an outline of your body made with your veins. Effectively, to explain what Choso was telling Yuji to do, it's to use his own blood manipulation to scan his own entire body in order to see what is and isn't wrong. And by doing that, he'd be able to find the injured part of his body, then he can use reverse curse technique on it directly in order to heal that part of his body after. Which this is a good method of using blood manipulation in order to scan your body. This would also likely work in other people's bodies too, which would be absolutely nuts, but this is just a really good method in order to figure out what's wrong with your body and what's not wrong with your body. As then we get a battle directly between Maki and Sukuna, with Sukuna and Maki dodging several of each other's attacks, until Sukuna is eventually launched back directly by Maki after Sukuna tries to grab onto the sword itself to seal it, but Maki just straight up overpowers him. Though it should also be noted, this is Sukuna in a physically still weakened state because of how massively lowered his output has been thanks to Yuji's punches, but it still is something that's still incredibly impressive nonetheless, because this is still Sukuna ultimately at the end of the day. As Sukuna places his hand on the wall and uses his slashes in order to break the wall in order to make debris, as well as just blind Maki temporarily while having to force her to have to slash at the rubble coming at her in order for him to use his next attack. Which the next attack that Sukuna chooses to use is the World Slash, and we can see the chants they do in the process. It's actually kind of hard to see the other 2 chants, but we do know they do the full chant, and Maki actually somehow manages to dodge it, which is insanely impressive, more likely thanks to her ability to see into the future as well as her heavily enhanced senses. Which is still impressive. But what's even more impressive is the fact that Sukuna comments on the fact that Maki can see the technique much better than the other sorcerers, just like their fight with Mahoraga in Shibuya. Which means that Maki's level of soul perception is so good it's being compared to the thing that directly evolved in order to fight against Sukuna. And that Maki's level of soul perception is so good it outdoes X-ray levels of vision from Kashimo, as well as Yuji's ability to directly see it through having Sukuna inside of him at like a previous point, as well as Gojo's 6 eyes in the previous points as well. Man, I just said previous point a lot, didn't I? Anyway, right back to the chapter. As Maki is able to pretty easily figure out what Sukuna was doing, where they say he's using cursed energy to force his heartbeat while simultaneously healing himself. Looks like Megumi was serious about what happened in the juvenile detention center. Which overall, that is a really cool callback to what had happened in the past, and just how Sukuna was able to survive that because his heart was taken out. Gege is just an absolute master when it comes to using established concepts and having them return in major ways that most people end up forgetting, or just not thinking it would be relevant at all, but then showing off, yeah, no, this is going to be extremely relevant in the future. As Maki then attempts to taunt him right after saying that heart of yours, you're gonna keep that up while you fight me, with Sukuna saying in response, I don't see why not, I've hardly broken a sweat. Which that is absolutely insane. That Sukuna has not broken a sweat this entire battle, and maybe even in the past as well, during his battles against Yuta and Yuji as well, which that's just really nuts, and just shows the level that Sukuna is actually on, which that's going to become more important with what's about to happen in the next scene. As then right after, we move back to Urame and Hikari, and it looks like the entirety of the city is frozen based on what we can tell, or at least a large area of the city they were fighting in, which is insane. But we also know Urame is just over dramatic and they're an ice smurf. I don't know what you guys were expecting, if you guys were not expecting anything less than this. As Hikari effectively tries to smack talk against Urame, basically saying, yeah, no, we got this in the bag. At first I was really nervous about this when I saw that hulk of a behemoth that was Sukuna, but Sukuna's curse energy is plummeting. So Hikari had some confidence and he just straight up gave the nah-I'd win face, because like it's the same face that Gojo gave after Gojo had casted Unlimited Hollow. But then Urame goes on to correct him. As Urame directly says, you know not the caprices of Sukuna-sama. If his interest in his opponent is tenuous, so too will be the waves of his cursed energy. To think you could not present us with anyone greater than Gojo Satoru, you should be ashamed. Even bearing in mind the effects of his first battle, it's clear. Sukuna-sama has yet to go all out. Now this is an absolutely insane way to end off the chapter because it talks about a few things. Number one, if Sukuna is fighting against an opponent he enjoys fighting against, he gets a buff. Because that's at least what Urame is implying with that statement, which is nuts and terrifying, that if Sukuna is actually fighting someone he enjoys, he gets stronger. Either that or Sukuna gets weaker when he's fighting against opponents that he doesn't enjoy, and he can only really go all out when he does fight against opponents who he does enjoy, which that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, no, Sukuna is still holding back. And this kind of implies even in his battle against Gojo he was holding back, which we kind of already knew directly from Gojo's own statement that Sukuna was holding back. And now Urame is also confirming that Sukuna was holding back, and that's terrifying. Like, we might need to talk about if Sukuna is getting too strong for the plot to handle, because, oh boy. Because especially considering the fact they're like, you should be ashamed that you could bring no one stronger than Gojo. That line especially is just a sting line in comparison to everything else. But overall, I do think this is kind of a decent chapter. I don't think it's one of my top JJK chapters, but I do think it's a good chapter nonetheless. I loved the Choso and Yuji moment. I loved Maki versus Sukuna for the little bits of it that we got. It's great to see Hikari return. There's a lot of Eutacopium up in the air right now. So yeah, overall, this was certainly an improved chapter. Anyways, I'm going to see y'all later. Tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below of this chapter. Peace out. Have a good day.